This is the kind of scenario that unfolds when you venture far too close to a U.S. aircraft carrier. No national flag, no AIS ping, no acknowledgement on radio channels, just an old, rusted fishing vessel drifting toward 100,000 tons of American warship as if it had nothing left to risk. Initially, there was no alarm. Small craft are a common sight in congested maritime zones, especially near tight corridors like the Red Sea or the Strait of Hormuz. But something about this one felt wrong. It wasn't following any recognized route. It zigzagged erratically, paused, drifted off course, then surged forward again. From the vantage point of the USS Gerald R. Ford's bridge, it didn't resemble a harmless boat. It looked like a probe. So, what happens when a small vessel, possibly loaded with explosives or surveillance tech, defies every warning sent its way? You don't sit around waiting for answers. Because this wasn't a simulation. It wasn't a drill. It was the real thing. And the next 10 minutes would demonstrate exactly how the U.S. Navy responds when a potential threat edges too close to the world's most advanced warship. And this fishing boat? It couldn't have picked a worse target. Inside the Combat Information Center, known as CIC, the operator didn't need to shout. The threat was already visible on screen, a small contact behaving unpredictably, just 4,000 yards out and closing in. No AIS broadcast, no name, no origin, nothing. That in itself wasn't rare. Many fishing boats in international waters travel without active transponders, but this one wasn't behaving like a fishing vessel. It wasn't trolling. It wasn't merely drifting. It was heading directly for the Ford's port side. Slow, yet intentional. Bridge to CIC, unidentified contact drifting left, speed under 5 knots, erratic maneuvers. The deck officer leaned over the navigational chart. The trajectory didn't add up. No reply on VHF Channel 16. The standard ship-to-ship communication line. Flight deck, this is Bridge. Prepare the Seahawk for deployment. Set Security Alert Condition 3. That status meant the vessel was shifting into a defensive posture. Not full combat mode, but definitely not business as usual. Below decks, sailors sprang into readiness. Weapons crews began checking their stations. Lookout scanned the horizon through binoculars. The message was unmistakable. Keep eyes on it. Don't assume anything. The order repeated, steady but firm, Seahawk launching, RHIB teams on standby. In less than 2 minutes, they'd close in for inspection. Up top, there was no hesitation. Yellow shirts moved like clockwork, because they'd drilled this moment countless times. The Seahawk's rotors were already chopping the morning mist into a whirl. The crew chief locked in the gunner. One nod from the pilot, a wave of clearance, and the chopper lifted into the sky. Meanwhile, in the hangar bay, RHIB units loaded into their craft. These weren't inflatable boats. They were 11-meter, high-speed interceptors, fully armed and operated by sailors trained to board anything, anywhere, in seconds. USS Ford hadn't gone to general quarters. Not yet. But the layers of defense were coming online, one after another, like a hand slowly forming a fist. On the bridge, the captain examined the track again, still creeping portside. Speed low. No declared intent, and that was the danger. Because in regions like the Gulf of Oman or the Red Sea, this is often how it begins. One unidentified boat. Then an explosion. Or maybe it's a surveillance op. Maybe just a mistake. But you never wait to find out. You assume all of them, and prepare accordingly. The Seahawk swept low across the waves, dropping to a hover just 200 feet above sea level. From the gunner's view, the old fishing boat looked even more suspicious. 5 individuals on board, no uniforms, one of them positioned at the bow, still clutching that long, unidentified object. No reply to radio calls. The Seahawk pilot relayed the update. No visual confirmation, no communication. Vessel maintains course. Meanwhile, on the deck of the Ford, the RHIB team stood by, awaiting the go-ahead. All it would take was a single command from the captain, and they'd launch. But before that, the Navy was offering one final opportunity for that small boat to respond. If it didn't, the situation would escalate rapidly. The boat gently rocked with the current, yet there was no attempt to alter its heading or reply in any way. No gestures, no lights, just 5 motionless men staring back. Then the pilot's voice cut through the radio. Possible antenna structure, visible on mid-deck. Improvised, unheard-of function. Antennas on a fishing boat aren't unheard of, but they're never a good sign. Smugglers sometimes retrofit old radios to stay in touch with offshore networks. Other times, it's surveillance hardware. And out here, surveillance rarely means anything benign. The Seahawk's door gunner shifted his weapon downward, but didn't engage. It was a warning, not an attack. From above, one of the men finally moved, slowly raised both hands above his head. The pilot made another pass and caught something new. A tarp, tugged aside slightly. Underneath? Metal tubing. Shiny, definitely not standard fishing equipment. Could have been plumbing. Could have been worse. But that was all the confirmation needed. This wasn't random. This wasn't new. And with the boat this close, nobody was gambling. The order was issued. Deploy RHIBs. Eyes on. Weapons tight. Fire, only if provoked. From the starboard side, 2 RHIBs launched in seconds. Each vessel manned by 6 sailors in body armor, rifles prepped. They accelerated hard, slicing through the water like predators on a target. No blaring sirens, no warning lights, just silence, discipline, and the heavy air of something serious unfolding. Whoever was aboard that fishing boat was about to get a first-hand visit. The boarding teams didn't waste a moment. The lead RHIB drew alongside, hooks deployed, boarding party over the rail in moments. Orders shouted, weapons raised. The men on board, if they were even fishermen, were immediately secured, restrained with zip ties, and searched on deck. Meanwhile, the second team went for the tarp. What they uncovered: long metal cylinders, wiring bundles, satellite phone, extra fuel containers. Some of it could pass as maritime gear. Most of it absolutely couldn't. No flag, no name. Still no ID. Whatever business this boat had out here, it wasn't catching fish. And with the deck now secured, the Navy was about to find out what kind of operation they'd stumbled onto. The RHIB crews moved fast. One sailor shut down the engine system. Another swept the deck carefully for tripwires or hidden storage. Every surface was approached like it might be booby-trapped, because sometimes it is. The 5 men were zip-tied and seated at the stern under the guard of 2 sailors armed with M4 carbines. None of them spoke a word of English, or if they could, they weren't going to. Either way, questioning could wait. Step 1. Secure the vessel. The boarding officer popped open a storage compartment. Inside, jerry cans, tangled wires, cheap handheld radios, and a bundle of documents soaked in a mix of diesel and seawater. A sailor pulled out a weather-beaten sat phone with a cracked display. One number showed up in the call history. No contact name, just digits. The sequence didn't correspond with any known vessel registry. Then came the real surprise. Tucked beneath the tarp at the back, a thick wad of currency. Not US dollars, not Yemeni rials, but Iranian. That changed everything. Because when you find Iranian banknotes and encrypted communications gear on a suspicious fishing boat drifting near a U.S. carrier strike group, it's no longer just an intercept. It's an intelligence goldmine. Back in the Combat Information Center, CIC, the boarding team's reports streamed in live. Images came through handheld uplinks. Equipment documents, and close-ups of each detainee's face. Within minutes, intelligence analysts began flagging items for deeper review. Was this just smuggling? Or surveillance? Or something more serious? No one knew yet, but the signs were coming in fast. While the RHIBs prepared to secure the vessel for full inspection, the carrier didn't skip a beat. Aircraft continued to launch. Flight operations pressed on without delay. Because the Ford doesn't slow for anomalies. It keeps its rhythm, and if something gets in the way, the Navy deals with it and carries on. Once the target boat was stabilized, it was hitched for tow and redirected toward a nearby destroyer for a comprehensive sweep. The RHIB crews offloaded the detainees and gathered evidence. Fuel manifests, communication gear, and the bundle of Iranian currency. All sealed, tagged, and turned over. Aboard the USS Gravely, Navy intelligence got to work immediately. The sat phone went into digital forensics. Radios were tested for encryption codes, or stored channels. Documents were translated, then cross-checked with existing threat profiles. In recent years, similar vessels have been intercepted. No flag, low power, drifting in proximity to high-value Navy assets. Some turned out to be smugglers ferrying weapons. Others were covert observers feeding targeting data for future attacks. In 2022, a fishing vessel off Oman's coast was found carrying drone components. A year later, another was stopped in the Strait of Hormuz. Its crew claimed to be adrift, but they had encrypted comms and night optics on board. Which is why these contacts aren't treated as minor annoyances. They're probes. Tests to measure how close one can get before drawing a response. They're used to study timing, radar coverage, and aerial reaction windows. So, even a lone skiff gets the full checklist. Visual confirmation, radio queries, aerial flyovers, RHIB intercepts, and full boarding procedures. Because if you ignore one of these boats, that's when it becomes a problem. And if this vessel was part of a wider strategy, it wouldn't be the first time. To most observers, a small boat on the water seems harmless. But to the U.S. Navy, it's an unknown variable. And when you're managing a 100,000-ton carrier in potentially hostile waters, there's no such thing as a harmless unknown. That's why the USS Gerald R. Ford never sails alone. Every American aircraft carrier operates as the nucleus of a carrier strike group, a floating fortress that includes destroyers, cruisers, submarines, and supply ships. Together, they form a multi-layered defense matrix built to detect, assess, and neutralize threats far before they reach striking distance. It all begins with surveillance. From the E-2D Hawkeye circling overhead to the SPY-1 radar arrays mounted on Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, every movement in the sea or sky is tracked, sorted, and analyzed. A skiff sailing without an AIS ping? Logged. A route that deviates from shipping lanes? Noted. A radio burst on an unusual band? Flagged. But detection is only step one. Next comes escalation. It starts with setting security condition 3. A quiet, but swift rise in ready. Sailors move to defensive stations. Internal communications shift to secure channels. The flight deck boosts its sortie tempo, and helicopters like the MH-60R Seahawk lift off, equipped with surface search radar, thermal optics, and a door gunner trained to make life-or-death calls in a heartbeat. As the threat draws nearer, the response evolves. RHIBs, fast, agile, and purpose-built. Deploy with VBSS teams. Visit, board, search, and seizure units trained for rapid, high-stakes engagements. These aren't routine boardings. They're tactical interdictions executed in open seas with precision. But that's just scratching the surface. Every ship in the strike group is a weapons platform, interceptors, SM-2 missiles for aerial threats, ESSMs for short-range defense, and the CIWS, Close-In Weapon System, or CIWS, a radar-guided Gatling cannon that unleashes 75 rounds per second. There's no warning shot from the CIWS, it just fires. Here's the part most people don't realize. This scenario plays out regularly. In the Gulf of Oman, Red Sea, and South China Sea, Navy vessels are approached by small, unidentified boats nearly every month. Some are careless fishermen. Others are surveillance platforms, contraband couriers, or worse, weaponized boats scouting for vulnerabilities. That's why the Navy reacts the way it does, not out of paranoia, but from pattern recognition. Because hesitation carries consequences.